Upgrades.
And welcome back again, ladies and gentlemen, to another JVS television review of the new Hulu on FX show Class of '09. We are on episode 4 this week, which is entitled Not Your Girlfriend. It's an odd title to have for this show. But it's your guy here, Lucas, with my guy, Mr. JVS Media and Productions, Mr. Supercell 00320. Look here, that was your name. I'm gonna keep on saying it over and over. I love when I say that over and over again too, because eventually I'm gonna get to the point where it just comes up and it's just perfect when I say it. But what's going on tonight, sir?
Hey, what's going on, Lucas?
So here we are here to get into again episode 4. Again, this is entitled Not Your Girlfriend. This episode starts off a little different than any other episode so far this season, as at the beginning of this episode, instead of going back to the past in '09, we go back to 96
Yeah.
in the past, and we see Drew, who is one of the trainers on an undercover mission. And during this undercover mission, we see her get shot multiple times by fellow agents. What did you think was the purpose of starting the show off this way?
I thought it was really weird because I was like, well, maybe this has to do with like the backstory for Mark and kind of why he's targeting the FBI. There's a purpose behind it. But I think, watching it from the very beginning, it was kind of like out of left field because I was like, they kind of seem like they're breaking protocol. Like, why are they leaving the van? It didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And she even said it. And then sure enough, I was like, first off, y'all secured the area and then you shot somebody coming off like it was just so strange how it all went down, but it was also a little bit believable. But the symmetry behind it makes sense towards the end of the episode, how it was a full circle situation.
Exactly. Then next up, we go immediately back to '09 and with the classroom, as here they give them a quick history of guns and the FBI. And they informed them that they would be giving them all Glock 23s. For someone who absolutely loves guns, I absolutely hate the Glock 23. But they all give them all Glock 23s. And then as they're issuing these weapons, they want to give them backstories on their first time shooting a gun. So, what did you think about Teo's story about the first time he shot a gun? What did he do with the gun for people that don't know, people don't understand? It was weird because you normally only break down a Glock that way if you're about to clean the Glock. You don't need to break it down that much to check anything. Unless you just want to make sure every piece of the weapon is in there, there's literally no need to break down the Glock as much as he did. But what do you think about after he broke down the gun, his story? And then we'll talk about the next one after that. But first here, I'm just going to focus on Teo because the other story bleeds into a completely different issue.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for his MO because he doesn't trust anyone or anything. So it's kind of like for his perception, this could be a test. Like it could be that, is this a situation that they're going to set me up to misfire or is the pin messed up? So I'm going to go and check it procedurally up and down. And at the same time, they understand I know what I'm doing, which is another inferiority complex thing with him. But they kind of asked like, you know your way around, like, and he kind of was like, well, yeah, like I've been doing this for years and, I've been kind of making sure to know how to protect myself. I'm not going out to shoot anybody. I'm trying to make sure that I know how to protect myself as much as the owners. Now, the funny thing about Teo's situation is when he went through everybody, everybody kind of missed the target with the girl with the baby. But then
Why are you trying to jump ahead?
Well, no.
I was focusing only here on Teo in
Wait,
his story here.
wait,
I
but
know you're trying to jump ahead. You
no,
can't
no,
jump
no,
ahead.
no, no. It started with him not shooting, the black guy hesitating, and then he went through and did it. But I knew that was a trigger for him, and I was kind of like, I'm curious to see how he reacts
Here you go.
moving
Why would you
forward.
perceive that to be a trigger for him?
So, because this is the thing, like he kind of looked at it, assessed it. He was like, well, because the perception is that happened to him. He was racially profiled, so like it could be somebody. The person that they showed didn't even have a gun. It was just a black dude. Like they didn't have a gun at all. And so I mean, he waited for a second and then shot and then like checked himself and kept moving. So for me, I was
Wait,
like,
wait, wait. You said the guy he shot didn't have a gun.
nah, the black dude didn't have a gun.
If he didn't have a gun, wouldn't he have failed the test then? Because then didn't he shoot an innocent civilian?
I, I don't know. I didn't think so. When I looked, I didn't see a gun on the black cardboard.
I would
Maybe.
say if he was to shoot a cardboard and the guy did have a gun, it'd have been an immediate. I think it would be more questions than you shot really good here. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say
I,
it's gonna be
I'm
way
gonna
more
go back
questions
and
than
look, but I thought
you
the black
shot
dude.
good. Yes, I'm just letting you know now. Yes, the black dude did have a gun, sir.
Okay,
That would have been the oddest thing in the world. If he didn't have a gun, boy, would we have questions about why the hell did Teo shoot him then?
because my head went. I literally thought he didn't have a gun, and I was kind of like, they're testing based on his backstory, like because I was like, they definitely are listening in on him, and they know a lot about him, so it's
But
kind
then
of like,
wouldn't I would assume if that's the case, wouldn't we question then why did he shoot the target?
yeah, it's true.
But
Yeah,
yes, the black. I'm just bringing that up to say yes, the black guy did have a gun in the clip, sir. That's not where I thought you were going to go with it. I thought you were going to stay more on the hesitation of it. But again, you tried to jump ahead. We are only here focusing on the story he told about getting a gun because it's very. I think that tells us more about Teo than what we've really seen for the rest of this show so far. Is that he said, I learned how to shoot to protect myself, not because I'm a gun nut, not because it's something I love doing. So
yeah,
that just tells you automatically for someone to be that disciplined, and I'll get back to their shooting later because I have issues with the way that was shot. But for someone who's supposed to be a gun nut, you would expect that answer that they go to the ranges all the time. But this is someone who said, I went to ranges all the time, ran by this little Asian man,
mhm,
because in my neighborhood, basically, I had to learn how to shoot.
yeah,
Like, that's a hell of a thing to go through your mind of saying, man, I need to learn how to shoot to survive. Most people don't. Most people either shoot for fun or to practice for some form of safety, but to shoot to survive is crazy. But
right.
next up, we get Hour, who gets up there to well, should have yes, Hour was next. She gets up there to shoot, and she tells them, "This is my first time handling a gun."
Yeah,
After she tells them this is the first time handling a gun, we get a backstory of her and her parents. What did you think? We kind of understood because she brings it up in the first episode, her father's history with law enforcement, and kind of why she made this decision. But what do you think about here that she held this from her parents and then the way her parents responded to her even doing something like this?
yeah. Like she kind of just didn't want to be stopped. And both parents were hip. Like you could have told us this a long time ago. You knew for a fact that
Mhm.
we were going to say don't do it because it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to service, in this situation. Because I mean, we're already getting racially profiled. You already know the situation that your father's
Mhm.
gone through. Why would you put yourself at risk like that? And she was like, "This is how I want to serve. This is what I want, and
Yeah.
they want me." And I think the mom said something along the lines of like, "You're just really lonely. Like you just want to feel needed. You were a single
Mm.
child. You were alone." And she said something interesting. She was like, "I may always feel lonely, but they know for a fact that they can find something out of me to use." And the
Yeah.
sad thing was, it's kind of like, a lot of people go through this with their parents. Like they come through
Hmm.
a crossroads, like, this is where my destiny is, this is where I want to go.
Yeah.
And the parents are on the opposite end of the spectrum with it. And she kind of was like, was it too much to hope that you guys would have been happy or proud
Happy.
to be making it? And they were like, nah, bro, that's a terrible idea. And I mean, I've seen other parents do situations similar to this, whether it's like, oh, you're going into the military, or you're doing this, or you're forsaking your degree to go and do something that. Because I mean, yeah, she graduated with MIT. Like she can do whatever she really wants to do, from a technological standpoint. But
Hmm.
she felt like this is what she's called to do, and they didn't want to hear it. But yeah, I'm not. I wonder how she did in the. I don't think they ever showed whether or not she passed the shooting test, because
For
it
sure.
never went
Oh,
back
they did.
to.
They did. They showed. They showed. They very briefly they bring it up at the beginning of the shooting test
Oh,
about
okay.
what happened. But her next test actually is a poly
Yeah.
that she set up to take here. Now, for people who've taken a poly before, one, I'll just say this. You tend to be extremely nervous and not ask remotely the amount of questions that she asks here. That's why the guy who gave the test was telling her, certain people go in it to fail this test. Are
Right.
you trying to fail this test? Because that was a legitimate question he was asking, because no one is this talkative. But here in this scene with our, what we get is foreshadowing
Yep.
of her actually questioning, like, hey, if you do this, how many have you done? 100. Well, it's 50,000 agents.
Right.
I'm pretty sure they've done a lot more than 100 of these. Why
Mhm.
isn't there a database that all this information is entered into? That
Right.
way you're dependent on more than just your perception of someone telling the truth. Because that's all a poly is whoever takes that, who's ever grading it, it's their perception if you're telling the truth here.
Yeah.
What did you just think about the way she questioned him here? And is this too much foreshadowing? Meaning, is this too on the nose for this show that she would ask all these questions and then come up with this database this way?
I mean, I think it's just how her mind works, which is very fascinating. Like her mind went, instead of focusing on the nervous side, she went to, how can we make this more of an efficient thing? Like, how like some people are perfectionists and they're doing
Yes.
one thing, but then they get really like in something else. That seems like her MO. And I think that's the driving force which pr- puts her in a trajectory to create what she created. Because what she was saying made a lot of sense, but I was kind of like, girl, like you're gonna you're gonna fail your way out before you can even make this happen. But she was so honed in on like the efficiency side of it, she lost the fact that she's not in any kind of place to do that. But it's foreshadowing in a sense because she's doing it in present day. Like present day,
Yeah.
like they had already shut her thing down, and she's making these judgment calls, and like she's in no place to do what she's doing. Like they're going outside the grid at this point.
Yeah.
I did think it was a little on the nose, but I think it made me understand how she got to creating it the way she did, because she wants to feel valued. She needs to feel like somebody looks at her with admiration from her creative
Yeah.
standpoint. And matter of fact, I think when he asked that question, she was offended by it. She was like, "Oh, here we go, another man like looking at me in a certain kind of way because
Mansplaining this to me.
right." And she missed the whole reason why he asked that question.
Yeah.
But
But then next up, we go back to the present with Teo questioning Mark. All I'm going to ask is two questions here. One, what did you think about this brief conversation between Teo and Mark? And second, what do you think about the system not being able to track the truck right properly? Do you think that was a bit of foreshadowing by not being able to do that? That maybe someone thought more AI was needed
yeah,
so that wouldn't happen again.
yeah. For whatever reason, even when Hour was asking her people, she was like, "What? This doesn't make any sense." And I think, matter of fact, Poet was the one that was like, "I've seen that guy before,"
Mhm.
and I kind of was like in my head there, I was like, "Okay, yeah, there's an inconsistency here because they're not seeing something." Because if the database was like, oh, this person worked construction here, or this person is currently in Quantico, but they have a history of this, like all that would have been quickly deduced. But I thought that was really fascinating. But the conversation with Teo and Mark was very fascinating because it was like a cat and mouse game. Like Mark seems to have researched Teo quite a bit, just off of how he kind of described him. It was almost like I don't know how he has an animosity against Teo, but at the same exact time, like he seems like he's very fascinated with him. It's just so weird because he's kind of like, you've been waiting for this your whole entire life. And Teo was like, look, I'm a lot of things, but you're the last person on my list. But I mean, part of what they both were getting at was their own truths, which is very fascinating. I just don't know why Mark is doing what he's doing. I really don't.
Let me ask a more important, different type of question here. Did you believe Teo when he said that?
No.
That you're the least of my concerns?
No.
Because immediately you go back to the second episode when the first thing his partner said is 2 others have already been out here. Why are we going out here again on a fishing expedition?
Yep.
It literally saying that Mark was his 100% focus and him attempting to find out what was going on here.
Yep.
So I think it was Mark reading Teo and Teo not fully understanding how to respond to him being read that way.
Yeah.
Because Mark pinpointed everything with Teo. Like, you're the lead FBI agent in the state. Why are you the one coming out here to question me? That would make no sense.
Right.
Like, with your power, with the level that you're at, that's a grunt work to do that. But why are you doing it? Like, it was fascinating to see the way Mark broke this down and to see Teo. I'm not saying he was stammered, but he clearly was thrown off by the questions.
Yeah.
The way Mark was responding to everything, down to him bringing up Mark's wife. Him saying, man, I brought her from nothing. Like, she owed everything to me.
Right.
Like, it was a heck of a thing to bring up. But next up, we get the students at the gun range. Now, this answers your question right here. So, right before Teo shoots, Hour is coming directly off of the range. And it was Gabriel that said, oh, you're a natural. They never show her shooting. They just say, oh, you're a natural. And then we get the shooting expedition of Teo and Poet. As we already brought up about Teo and his hesitancy when it came to shooting a black person. I'm just going to say, as someone who shoots often, as someone who does, when I shoot, I do a body armor drill because unfortunately for what I do for a living, I'm trained to do a body armor drill. Those shots was all over the place. I'm just letting y'all know that now. I understand for the show they make it seem like those are clean shots. The grouping on those shots were absolutely horrible. It threw me off a little bit because I expected like Teo. I thought his group would be extremely tight. I know I'm sounding like a complete gun nut right now, but that's what drew all my attention there. But after Teo shoots and hesitates, you notice Gabriel and Drew didn't say anything about his hesitation. What do you think before we get to Poet? Do you think that was more of an understanding that him being a black man, that would be a hesitation for him to have?
Yeah, I mean, it felt completely intentional because all their little cardboard cutouts were completely different, and it seemed like they were tailored to them. So I think that I think they were assessing it on whether it would be a risk. I think they were looking at it. Would it be a risk? Would he freeze up, or would he have like an emotional reaction to it? In fine Teo fashion, he paused for a second, but then he still went through with it. But I do think that they assessed it for sure.
Yeah. And then next up is the most interesting one of the bunch, and that is Poet. As she gets up there to shoot, she runs through a couple of them, and then when she gets to a woman with a purse with a gun and glasses on, she pauses and lets the time run out. Here's where we get the questions from Drew. Why didn't you kill that person? And Poet, being Poet, asks to me every question you're supposed to ask, which is, I didn't see that person as a threat. They had a gun. Why wouldn't they be a threat? Look at the type of gun they have. They could be law enforcement. That's a backup revolver. The point she was able to pinpoint that is miraculous.
Right.
But that point as a backup revolver, but not only is it a backup revolver for law enforcement, it is one of the leading weapons that people tell you to get for self-protection. And she said, look, she got her purse. She looks scared. She looks disheveled. She could be fleeing an abusive relationship. She broke down everything. And it ended with Drew saying, we didn't ask you to give a psychological exam on them. We asked you to point out the threat and end the threat. And Poet says the best line of the show. If I don't assess it, how am I killing somebody? Shouldn't I assess it before I kill them? What do you just think about this exchange with Poet and the instructors? And once her hesitancy happens and she doesn't shoot, what did you think was going to happen to her?
So it was interesting because I felt like for her, the test was going to be, did she have an issue, shooting a woman? And what did that mean? What was the inner workings of her mind looking at it and assessing people? Because I mean, we already know that Poet gives people second chances. She's a person of hope,
Yeah.
but she also is a person of control. And like, I love how the instruction was like, you assessed all that in a few seconds. Like, I didn't ask you to do that. And she kind of was like, nah, like you said, like and technically in a real world situation, if she was a negotiator, what Poet said is actually correct. Like, I would
Yeah.
hope somebody would assess it that way. It's just, it's weird because in a training simulation, I think that the correct or the political correct answer would be like, no, like you're not supposed to question. The person had a gun, they have it pointed at you, like you go and you go for the body shot. But she looked at it and was like, nah, like I'm looking at this like a real world situation, which is very fascinating how Poet's mind works. The sad thing is, from a system standpoint, if anybody else evaluated her, they would look like, oh, she just didn't have it in her to shoot a woman because they had a gun on. And that's not the truth. But
Yeah.
the other part of it is Poet's perspective of it, that can go either way. it could be that the
Yep.
person really actually is, a supercell and happens to do that. How do you make that
How
split
do you
decision?
pinpoint the difference of it? Yeah.
Right. So
But I think it was even more interesting that after Poet gave the answer the way Drew's face is, because technically, what Poet is saying she did is what she would have hoped the
they are
guys who shot her at the beginning of the episode did. They didn't assess anything. They
yeah.
just saw someone with a gun and started shooting.
Yeah.
That makes a horrible cop because you actually are supposed to assess the person before you just start firing at them.
Yeah.
Because again, at the beginning, Drew never had even chance to say I'm law enforcement. All they said was gun and started shooting. And it's almost equivalency what they wanted Poet to do there. But again, as you said, everyone got kind of a different target at the end. And or at least Teo and Poet, because those are the ones we saw. And they got them for a reason.
Yeah.
Again, everything is a test. They got that target for a reason because they needed to see your perception of that target.
Yeah.
It may not have even been to see if Poet would shoot a woman. It literally could have been, are you going to assess that this could be a non-threat? Because
Right.
just because the person has a gun doesn't make them a threat.
Right.
So I think this is just an amazing setup. And it also reminded me of Men in Black. When they were all shooting the aliens, and Will Smith made every reason why he shot none of the aliens and shot the white girl because she has a quantum physics book at night. Clearly, what she's doing is gonna be evil. Like it's about assessing a situation. No, that's a weird comparison, but that's the first
It's
one
actually really true. That's really true.
that pops in my head as an awesome comparison there. So after the range, we get a quick conversation between Poet and Hour about dating, about life, about everything they're supposed to do as agents, and about allowing yourself to, I guess, fall from someone, because that's the way it was coming across. In the middle of this, we get a kiss that came out of nowhere, and a kiss that wasn't even like explained of why that would be something to like stop that form of a conversation. What did you think quickly about this conversation between Poet and Hour about her giving her permission to date? Because that was a weird way they worded that, and her kissing her and say, "You, I give you permission to do this." What did you think about that back and forth between them two?
I mean, I think it was really fascinating. Like, Poet finally opened up and about her relationship with their mother, what happened with their mother, why she didn't date, because kind of dealing with guilt and perception of
Yep.
what dating actually
Mhm.
does. And then also how she looks at Hour as a very, not a maternal figure, but somebody close, from an intimacy
Yeah.
standpoint, which makes sense of their relationship. The thing that I have issue with is that from the last episode to this episode, I feel like I missed the episode in between because the transition don't line up. Like, they were just in the gas station bed together, and they were going through that, and then the next transition. But that's we'll talk about that in a
But
second.
remember though, when they were in the bed together, that was 2034.
Yeah, but they didn't. Anyway, we'll leave it there. I'm saying, just the whole episode, last episode, was built up to explain the process of how their relationship works. But then this one, it was more about Lennox, and we'll get there in a second. But as far as the kiss, I mean, it kind of, they keep teasing at something that I don't see.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's
Mhm.
like exposition without words. I don't really know how to explain it. It's kind of like, even the look, like, if nobody had knocked on the door, I would think they'd be making out next, because the way she
That's what it
she
seemed like.
received
Yeah.
the kiss on the cheek, and she looked at her, and then she looked like, oh man, I gotta go. But Hour was kind of like just smiling, like she's gonna come back to me. Basically, that was the look that I saw that Hour had, and I was like, what is going on? What is really going on?
Yeah.
But
Also, I wasn't even sure if it was a after talking about her mom, was it a motherly kiss? Because it was on the cheek.
it was, it was.
And normally when you kiss someone on the cheek, it's not necessarily a sexual kiss. At least I've never perceived someone kissing someone in an intimate fashion on their cheek. That's not something that would normally happen. If it would have been lips, then I would have saw that. But here, I'm not sure if it was coming across as a, a replacement for a mom giving her permission to do this, because that's what Poet actually needed there.
Yeah, I think she played it safe to give her what she needed, but she also wanted to show a level of affection outside
Mm,
of what she could do. And I think that's
yeah,
a part of Hour in general. She's always putting up a facade because she can't really express what she really wants to do. Um,
yeah. Now, here we go. Next up, because this episode stays a lot in the past at first. And here we get another scene in the past as Drew comes by to give Poet her second poly. For again, people that don't know, especially in these type of settings, you're gonna get more than one poly because they need to run back those questions again to see if you lied. Here is where it's hinted towards it, but we know for a fact this is where Poet tells them her and Lennox are together,
mhm.
because she felt the need to. She read the rule books and fully understood that technically their relationship was something that both of them could get kicked out for.
Right.
And Poet didn't want to end up getting caught on a poly and lying, and then everything going to kaput.
Right.
Because one thing they'll tell you in a heartbeat, when you take a poly, as long as you're honest, it's almost literally nothing we can't get past. But you have to be honest, especially for an FBI poly. And I'm not gonna tell you how I know that, but especially for an FBI poly, everything has to be truthful. What do you think quickly about this scene with the poly? And I'm gonna go immediately into the next scene of importance, and that is when Drew comes back up on Poet to warn her about being a woman in the FBI. And if your relationship does not work out, the woman will always get blamed for everything.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, with the poly, I mean, just Poet's MO, she's not gonna fail. She's not gonna let
No.
she's but even if it was like she accidentally shot somebody in her past
Mm-hmm.
and they asked her that question, she was going to say yes, because for her, it's like, I'll tell every secret and expose myself completely than to lose this. I cannot lose this. And so it made sense of her being upfront and honest about it. Um, it was just fascinating what happened, like you said, with the instructor, because the instructor was kind of like, look, bro, I gotta tell you, like, I'm not gonna tell you not to date. You know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it definitely transitions to folks even getting married. It happens. But she said, if y'all do break out, if there is a falling out, you will be the
Mm-hmm.
person that's assessed how this worked out. Like, it's gonna be like, oh, okay, you wigged out and compromise this, or you're having emotional reaction, so y'all both can't do this anymore. Like,
Yep.
she was like, look, there is a strong chance that that's going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
the sad thing is, I knew the moment that Drew said that, Poe was going to find a way to sabotage that relationship. Or maybe not even just that relationship, any form of relationship, because she's not
Mm.
going to let anything stop her from being what she wants to be, or what she claims that she wants to be. I'll leave it like that.
Yeah. What do you think about Drew's story when we go back again to the beginning of the episode? That after everything that happened to her, she was told she was in the wrong for coming out the car, for even presenting herself in that situation, and for her to say, "Hey, back then it was different. The things that women had to go through, and just because I'm a woman is why I was blamed."
Yeah. Yeah, it makes, unfortunately, it makes a lot of sense, because they were gonna cover for that guy that just rolled out. Like, he immediately dipped and was like, "Oh, I'm about to
Yeah,
go over there and help." And she said to him, like, "No, I think we need to stay in the car." And the moment she got out there and got shot, I knew for a fact, like, they're gonna try to
no,
cover
of
for
course.
themselves. And like, but somebody had to take the fall. And so the easiest thing to blame is, oh wow, she saw something and she walked out there. I couldn't see her, and so we shot her. And it's just sad, but that definitely something not just happened back then. That still happens. Like, it's unfortunately that people try to find ways of throwing other people under the
Yeah,
bus to suit their situation. And finding a fall guy, um, definitely does happen, sadly.
exactly. But also, what you think about by the end of this scene here, when we see Poet and Lennox together, and Poet asks Lennox, "Have you gotten your poly?" Him admitting that he got it, and him saying, "No, I lied about that. Didn't tell her all the truth about that." What did you think? Because we saw Poet's face change when he said, "Oh, I lied about that."
Yeah.
Because she's like, "Is it wasn't anything you needed to tell me?" Like, do you think this hurt Poet's perception of what their relationship was? Or did it change her perception of the system?
I think it changed her perception of the system, because at the end of the day, if even though she didn't lie and he did, it's still gonna look bad on her. Because it'd be one thing if they both told the truth, and but the fact that he lied, there's no ramifications of it, and there's no way for him to see it. And it's like, man, that's a broken system, because how did they not see it? Like, he found a way of dodging
Mm.
the question. And Hour, I think, said something along the same, like, yeah, I lied on my poly too.
Yeah, she
And
says that later on. Yep.
yeah, sorry. But
But no, 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 no. You can bring that up here because I'll go even deeper with this here. Maybe he didn't lie. Keep in mind, our said, I mean, Poet basically told them they're together. What happened if Lennox never saw it that way?
right,
Because if you didn't see it that way at that time, it wouldn't be a lie.
true.
But also, as Drew points out, like this always happens. So
Right.
this is not something we don't expect. You put men and women together, some of them are going to pay off, and some things are going to happen here. So
Yeah.
again, maybe it was that it's such an innocent lie, or it's an unnecessary lie, is what they would call it, where
Yeah.
we kind of know people are doing things. This is not something you have to lie about, but if you do choose to lie about it, we're not going to hold it against you, or if your true feelings are, you all are not together.
Yeah.
And the point that he also brings up when Poet tells him the rule they broke, and he said, "You actually read that?"
Man, right.
So at that point, if he doesn't read the manual to know that's a rule that's being broken, technically, he's nothing to lie about. I know
Ignorance is
nothing about
literally
that.
bliss. Right. Right. Yeah, because it was kind of like when he said that, I was like, well, maybe he looked at it as like, ain't nothing really changed. I'm still out here. I'm following my career. I mean, it's like for him, it's not that big of a deal. But for her, she's looking at this relationship as a risk. And
Yes.
it's an actual change and a deviation that she didn't expect. And so that's the reason why she looked at it, calculated the question, and answered the way she did. But if they asked him the same exact question, has anything changed, since the last time, like, and what is it? Like, he was like, no, nothing changed. Like, he
Yeah.
probably legitimately looks at that. And
Because he's thinking about his career and not necessarily his personal life. Because he
right,
made it abundantly clear that that shouldn't even be an issue.
right,
That's our personal life.
right.
It's I think you pinpointed it perfectly. It's Poet's inability to separate her professional from personal.
Yeah.
Like she immediately jumped to this could kick me out of FBI. He immediately jumped to that's none of their business anyway.
Right. Right. And it just shows the difference of their psychological profile. And more interesting is the fact that our kind of lied. And I think she said something real specific. She said something along the lines of, well, what did you lie about? She said something, and it was
Oh
really
no, she didn't tell her
interesting.
the truth. She just left it very vague. She didn't
Yeah.
want to say what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
I
left it
thought she said
extremely
something.
vague because basically I don't need them to know. And it at that point we kind of you can guess what you think that lie would have been about.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so, but she just said, "No, I lied," and a big lie. That's it. That's all you need to know. Something that needed to be told, basically. But
Right.
next up, we get Future Poet. This is our first time in this episode. I want to say in the future, we get Future Poet visiting Lennox's home, and here is where we debunk some of Samuel's thoughts from last episode, and that is Lennox evil in any way, shape, form, or fashion here? As Lennox tells Poet that all the people he know are terrified of this new system. They believe it's too big and they believe it's too powerful.
Hmm.
One, I must focus on that part first. What did you think about this initial conversation before we get into everything else with them in this episode? This initial conversation about the system, about her going to Linux to find out more information, and about people openly afraid to admit how terrified they are of this system.
Yeah, it immediately made me think like, is it that people are kind of like, man, the system is working, but then this doesn't seem right. So I'm not going
Yeah.
to say anything. I'm not going to be that whistleblower to talk about the
Mhm.
possible literal corruption of a system.
Yeah.
And then it also went to my head is like, why wouldn't people like talk to Teo about it? It must be the same exact
Mm.
fear because if he's the director and running all of it and is saying like this is the gospel, and he's talking about doing a whole nother term, like it's the same level of fear with him and the system, which is very
Exactly.
but the way that Linux was kind of like everybody is afraid of this, I'm like, dude, so if y'all afraid of this, then obviously something is broken. And I, I don't know. I think it's more terrifying to hear him say that coming from him present day and kind of the power he had
Yeah.
to now how he is it's very scary. Yeah.
Yeah. And then next up in the same scene, we get more information on their personal life between them two. What I'm going to pinpoint here is Lennox telling Poet as Poet tries to sidestep a question and make him answer it, and him say, "No, I'm waiting for you to answer it. I've been in love with you for 20 years,
Mhm.
but now I need you to give me an answer." And through the process of her trying to find out or give him an answer, we find out Lennox doesn't have an arm
Right.
through an amazing hologram or whatever that T2 arm he had was. We find out that he does not have an arm. What do you just think about him asking her that question, their intimate conversations in this moment, and to find out about his arm? Because I kind of think I know where he lost it at.
Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely know where both of them lost some appendages. It's I think the more interesting thing is that they both knew where the sensor was to turn both of those off.
Yeah.
For her, it was right behind her ear, and for him, it was kind of right at his forearm. And they both turned them off to look at each other. So they've become very bonded over the tragedy of losing these situations. The thing is, it goes back to like I said with Poet, and I think the hour said the same exact thing. Like the moment that it becomes intimate, you're gonna find a way of pushing that aside. And I think he even said it like every single time, like you find a way of sabotaging it. Because she asked him straight up, like, is it me? He was like, no, like every single time it gets very serious, you're kind of like, you're gonna try to find a way of exhausting it to the other thing or person
There
quitting
you go.
as
Uh-huh.
opposed to you doing it. And so you're gonna put every kind of excuse. It's just I question whether or not
Mm.
Poet actually really loves him. Um, because nothing about their relationship tells me that. And that's not to say that she loves Hour anymore, but it's just I think she needs him. But I don't know if she necessarily loves him the same. And I don't think she would ever
So,
tell him that either.
hmm,
Um,
do you question if she loves him, or would the bigger question be, does she have the ability to love him?
Given her situationship with Hour, she may not have that capacity.
Mm.
And to be honest with you, I kind of felt the same way about Teo. I was real surprised that Teo had a wife. But I don't know how long that's gonna last, literally or emotionally. But they both fit that same exact mode of like
Mm.
unavailable emotionally because of their ambition or their devotion to something. Like they push everything else to the side or jeopardize everything else to the side equally. So it may be that she just cannot. And I still trying to figure out where she's using both Hour and Linux at the same time and not making
Yeah.
them aware of how she's using them. And that to me is real. I don't like it. It's really grimy. It kind of makes me deflate my emotions towards Poet, but I mean, ain't nobody else any better at this point in the show.
Clearly, at this point in the show, everybody has a flaw in one way or the other so far. I think that's what's making this show so good is that you're still, while you're trying to figure out this big mystery, you're also trying to figure out the players in this big mystery and how is this working out for them. That at least that's the part that I pay attention to more than anything else. But next up, we get hmm, the big reveal. I want to say that we've been waiting for in so far in these first 4 episodes here, and that is first, Poet asks Honor about people infiltrating the bureau. This is why I asked about the when she found out that Lily Slide did that sway her trust or anything in the bureau, because here she thinks there's systems set up where they shouldn't be able to just get in, and this
Right,
is where Anna tells her, "Oh, I lied. Like, you don't think the poly is actually stopping people from
right.
getting into the FBI? Like, it happens all the time." And after that, this is where they don't really pinpoint who this gentleman is. Completely leaves it out to whoever it is. You clearly know he's evil just because of the way they frame him here. But right after they bring up someone lying and someone infiltrating, we see a young agent who's a trainee who then makes a phone call about we're about to go through weapon assessment. What did you just think about quickly here when he says that and makes that call about weapon assessment? Did you think what happens at the weapon assessment is what was going to happen as he went on a rampage after that at the weapon assessment?
So when he said that, I kind of was like, this seems like a part of it. All this feels like is a lot of distraction. I kind of was
Yeah,
like, this is distraction for something else. Just like the truck was a distraction for something else.
there you go.
So I felt like it was going to be in a calculated attack. I didn't know whether or not he was going to threaten to have like a bomb. What he did, I didn't think he was going to do, which we'll get into that. But that was
Yeah.
my assessment. I thought that this was going to be a calculated thing.
So then what did you think about when it wasn't? When we saw him just wait and then him go off and just start shooting everybody.
I felt like I'm gonna say this. I don't know. I don't know how to say this. I thought it was very fascinating. Really messed up. But I kind of was like, wouldn't there have been a contingency for that? Wouldn't somebody have
Wait,
been like
why
somewhere?
wasn't there a system in place to prevent anything of this nature from happening? I mean, this is unfortunately for a show that I like, and I like this scene, and I like the setup that they're doing. This almost completely took me out because I know for a fact it is a contingency plan in place for something of that nature. There's no way you're going to put trainees around weapons and not have a contingency if someone goes off.
Right.
Because at that point, you would think long range, long scope, someone should have been there to take it off. Even though whoever this trainee is, the way he dodges, the way he moves from side to side will make it extremely hard for a sniper to get him. I fully understand that. But it wasn't even a shot at him. He killed so many people before it was even a threat presented his direction here.
Right. It wasn't like even the way that he was looking towards everybody. Yeah, I mean, if I was in the group with them and I saw that, like, I don't know, like it just didn't seem realistic to me. Like I was like, there's no freaking way
Yeah,
somebody wouldn't have capped him before he killed two people.
yeah.
Not even how many. I don't know how many people he killed. That was ridiculous.
And it felt like 5,
Yeah.
6.
And what made it so bad is old girl Drew, man. She ended up right back on the ground, the same way
Mhm.
she was in '96. But
Shot
she
by a
finally,
different person in the FBI.
yeah, she used her gun though. She finally used her gun.
Now, what do you think about this setup here after the fact? The system is starting to look through things to try to pinpoint faces that it recognizes. And this is when Poet comes across and say, hey, I recognize this guy.
Yep.
He's been in the garage the whole time. What I'm going to ask you here is, did you think, or could it even been foreshadowed that this was a form of terrorist attack they were going to take? Because that is something I did not see coming out of anywhere.
Dog, the moment that the guy in the construction crew was like, "We're on," I was like, "Oh yeah, they're gonna blow up that building." I mean, I didn't know what they were gonna do, like what they did, but I was like, "Yeah, this is where this is going." I think I was just a little bit more perplexed at Poet's calm reaction. We'll get to that, but when she identified what it was, she didn't say, "Hey, hour. I think this person. There's something going on." I mean, the first thing she did, she called old dude Lennox and said, "We need to evacuate. I think something's going on." I don't know. Even with that, that
It,
felt so.
she wasn't sure of herself.
Yeah,
Like all the signs were there that she should be worried, but she still was fearful that she was making a wrong call because she told Lennox, "Hey, evacuate the building. It's on me if I'm wrong, but evacuate the building."
yeah,
Like she wasn't 100% sure of anything here.
yeah.
And this is also, I want to say, it's her distrust of the system.
Hmm. Mm.
Because remember, she's been fighting it these last 2 episodes. She's been fighting even using the system. So
Yeah.
why would her trust be in that the system could pinpoint someone and this would be the person I'm looking for? It almost sounded when she said, I believe I see him downstairs. It didn't necessarily, it didn't come across as her fully believing it was a threat as much as maybe the system messed up because this person works here anyway.
Right.
That's what it came across as. But after we find out that she was not wrong, we see how they bringing down the building. I don't know what form of acid that they were using there,
Oh, that was definitely liquid
to
nitrogen. That was definitely liquid.
to destroy the pillars of the FBI building in Washington D.C. I've again sometimes fantasy people. Some things need to be like fantastical. That something like this could ever happen. It would not. I'm just going to say that. But when she approaches the construction crew, we saw a slight hesitancy before she killed the first guy, and then she starts getting attacked by the second guy. What did you just think about the way this was shot? Because that's the most important part here. The way this was shot, the way it was set up, the slow reaction to believing Poet when she told them you need to evacuate the building because certain levels didn't even come close to even thinking about evacuating.
Right.
So what do you just think about the way they set this up, the big explosion crumbling? Because it's not an explosion at all. The big crumbling at the end as the FBI headquarters is brought down.
I I'm gonna say this. I've really truly enjoyed this show up until this point. When the actual attack happened, dog, it took me out. I can't even really fake. So when Poet went down to the bottom, she said freeze, and she just slowly going around, and she sees this pillar. She sees like the liquid nitrogen. The pillar is cracking. Instead of dipping and running out and calling like, no, everybody, the pillars are freaking giving out. She's still looking for a suspect, bro. Like it doesn't add up. And then even after she, manages to survive, she's still not running out of there. And it made no sense to me. I was like, you know that the foundations of the building are giving way, regardless of how fantastical or not. And you're not calling anybody, you're not running out. Like this building is about to cave in, and you're not even panicking. This is unrealistic at this point. So for me, it took me completely out. I was like, this feels rushed. It feels so
Oh,
cheap. I was just like, because I was looking at another movie last night, and you know what I'm talking about, and that movie was not good. I ain't
ah,
finished it, but it was not good. I'm kind of like it's giving me this vibes of this one movie right now. But when Lennox kind of catches back up to her, and like he was like, "We got to get out of here." I was like, "Ninja, you should have been gone. What? You could have called her. You didn't have to go back down there. All you had to do was call her." And of course, they get trapped. Whoop wop, and everything gives way, and they get kind of semi-crushed, which I guess that's how they lost their limbs. And then you see this big old blowout, and the CG was terrible for the freaking sinking
but
of
we're
the.
not going. We can't talk about the CG. It's not finished yet, sir. It'll
Anyway,
look better
well,
on
the way
television.
that the FBI building caved in, it makes sense for how the foundations were left out, but it happened so quick, and it just felt so dumb to me that it really took me out. This is the first ending to the episode on the series that I was kind of just like, I was waiting for this. I was waiting for more of a build up, and this did not give me. I feel like there were ways that they could have made this better. Whether it was like Teo kind of like hearing a call on the blip, like something's happened, or like Hour looking like, "Hey, Poet, are you okay? Did you
Mhm.
make it out?" Like, there's ways of making this feel more dramatic, and
Brand. Yeah,
this did not give me. I hope this is
it felt
not the actual end.
it
Either
felt like
way,
it felt like Geostorm.
yeah, I
It felt
think
like plain every Gerard Butler movie. It felt like Angel Has Fallen movies. It felt like one of those movies with the way this. What took me out was that um they didn't necessarily show us how many pillars it would actually take to take down for that building to crumble that way. Like, not only did it like come to it just crumbled to pieces off of this. I had so many questions about that. In the sense of how the buildup has gone for what was gonna happen, I hate to say it because it still is a shown terrorist attack on the show. It just seems so minuscule.
Right.
Like, it needed to feel extremely grand because it kind of feels like this incident is the catalyst for everything that happens moving forward. But if that's the case, this shouldn't be the catalyst for everything moving forward. It doesn't feel like it would be needed to be the catalyst of everything moving forward. Like to even when Poet gives the warning to everyone that you need to get out, at that point I was taken out because I'm like, oh, but if she warned them, I mean, yeah, people are gonna die, but like it's not the biggie extinction level event type of thing that would happen here if it
Yeah.
was multiple bombs going off in the building and no one knew about it or something of that nature. It felt a tad bit lackluster. It
Yeah.
felt like they had to come real quick to a conclusion here. I
Yep.
absolutely hated seeing Poet say freeze. And the guy said, "Oh, let me go get my supervisor." And then he slowly moves towards her. She shoots him, scans in front of her only, and gets grabbed from the back. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like,
It it I felt like they
at
did
this
that
point in
just to give
'09, you
her.
are a professional. You are a professional FBI agent. You know what people shouldn't be able to do that easily? Sneak up behind you.
Right. And I was kind of just like, I don't there was no reason for her to engage with the freaking building going. What were you going? Who were you going to detain if the building falls? It just made no sense. And to be fair, I think you saw True Detective season one, right? You know when Matthew McConaughey when the build up moment happens with the shootout, like the
Mhm.
build up for that is everything, regardless of how it's shot, regardless of whatever's scored or what happens. The build
Uh-huh.
up is everything, and they did not succeed on the build up or progression of it because now if this is the moment that's happened, this is the catalyst. It deflates the rest of the season for me, regardless if it's 4 episodes or 10 episodes. So I don't know.
Oh, dude, this
I'll
this
leave it
this
alone.
now I've never fully checked if it was 6 or 8 episodes, but at this point, I'm hoping it's 6
Yeah.
because you have really I wasn't expecting this reveal so soon.
Right.
Because we literally just got to him talking to Mark. Like, this is a quick turnaround. But again, I maybe that's what the show was supposed to give us was this unnecessarily very quick turnaround. And the episode ends, as Sam already said, with Lennox going back to get Poet for some odd reason. Um, Poet, I'm guessing she was in shock that she had to kill the second guy and froze up. 'Cause she wasn't gonna move until he told her, "We gotta go." Like, I'm just utterly confused a little bit about this. Maybe it'll get
Building
cleared up.
was cracking. The foundations were cracking. Sorry. Not even-
Hey, not only were the foundations cracking, but the foundations on they only showed the foundation on one side of the building cracking. Like, so then why wouldn't just that portion of that building collapse? Because the way those old buildings are built, they're built in sections for that reason. So maybe just that portion, but nah, the entire thing came crumbling down. It was a weird that was a weird setup there.
Wouldn't that
But
have taken like like a
we're not we're
24 to
not gonna
48
we're
hours
not
to
we're not gonna have this discussion on how long that would actually have taken to happen here. Just understand it took a little longer than what, but maybe because she said they had seen the construction crew before, so maybe they've been working on this for a while to weaken the pillars until
Oh, it's even worse because then it's the FBI building. Ain't nobody looking downstairs. What's going on?
and that's why I stopped talking because I realized that made no sense what I was about to say.
Anyway, I'm gonna
This
leave
is
it at
not a regular building. This is not a building filled with civilians. This is literally FBI headquarters, and you telling me you were able to get a construction crew with liquid nitrogen or whatever the hell that was, and no one questioned them or one. I know for a fact to be part of construction crew in the FBI building, you have to be escorted everywhere you went by somebody else with the FBI. And why they got a trainee, and this would have to be a veteran because a trainee wouldn't have that type of clearance. It's so many questions, but we're not going to talk about them. We're just going to say, or I'm just going to ask you, what are your final thoughts? Episode 4, Not Your Girlfriend.
Bruh, look. Can you explain what that even means?
Not Your Girlfriend?
Yeah, in this episode, the
I,
context. Of,
I think that's between Poet and Lennox.
oh, okay, all right, yeah. Mm. So this episode was the episode that I kind of didn't really necessarily like. I think there was some good elements there, some good character development. The gun range thing, even though uh, it was okay. I did like the character development of Poet in the beginning of the episode. I think the conversation with Mark and Teo was very fascinating because it basically showed that Mark has Teo dead to rights. Like he understands
Yeah.
him more than he understands and comprehends himself. I did love Drew's story in this one. Hopefully Drew made it. I don't think she did. And how she got killed was just so unnecessary. She didn't have to die like that. But dog, the ending was rushed. It wasn't, to me, it was poorly executed. It didn't make any sense at all. I mean, even the gun range thing didn't make any sense at all. And then the biggest thing is that I felt like the transition from the last episode to this episode, it kind of made this episode more of a Linux centric episode for the future, but it
Yeah.
kind of deflated. I mean, I haven't bought into their relationship. I never have. Like it's kind of like a
No.
thing that they just are doing. And the fact that Poet ended up with Lennox in this situation was okay, I get it, but I haven't
Yeah.
gotten enough investment with them as characters together. I've gotten way more investment from just the last episode with Hour and Poet
Uh-huh.
than any other relationship in the show. So it's kind of like when you transition and you take that. I don't think outside the little peck on the cheek, there was no good
None.
transition between episode to episode for
Yeah.
me.
Well, this is hard to say, but I never would have thought on a show that has 8 episodes that I would legit get a filler episode. And that's what this feels like for majority of it. A lot of it didn't necessarily feel poignant. The entire storyline with Drew felt completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
And I think it actually hurts the episode more than anything else because it's so unnecessary. This whole thing with Poet and Hour, while there is chemistry there, it's hard to believe that they will be together. It's even harder to believe that Poet and Lennox would be together.
Right.
It's so many things here. Every show gets a MacGuffin. You get one. It's as the old Spider-Man meme used to say when he would save people, and like everybody gets one save. Like everybody gets one of these type of episodes where you're kind of left stuck wondering what the heck is going on here. But maybe later on in the season, this gets cleared up and maybe this gets explained a little better. Because right now, I am completely lost of the importance of this episode. I understand this does show the big reveal of what happened to them in 2023, but it's still unnecessary. So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see where we're moving forward with this now.
Yep.
And you are not. You're like, dude, I don't care.
So
This
I
this
think
was not that you don't like the show, but this is not an easy episode to watch because I have so many questions because last episode left off and it was so intense when it left off.
yeah.
You were hoping for something that would pick up on that story, and instead it went the opposite direction and said, yeah, no, we're gonna bring up other stories here.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird.
I feel like from a written standpoint, they kind of like, well, maybe we can make this into a full series. Like, nah, we gotta make this limited. So we need to fast track this event really quick. But I think that you shouldn't feel like a filler
Mhm.
episode in the episode of the pivotal event. The pivotal event should have been your most, like that's the thing that sets off a
Yeah.
series. Like if I use Watchmen for instance, the flashback episode for Watchmen was that event. You know what I'm saying? Like it was
Yep.
one of the most important things to progress where every other character goes. Like every single show has that. I mean, if you go to Breaking Bad, like the moment that Hank died in the last season, like that was a pivotal event. We saw it
Yeah.
possibly coming. So I'm saying that in a show like this, as good as it's been, I mean, it shouldn't feel like a filler when the event moment happens. It just shouldn't. So, but hopefully, we'll
And
see. We'll see.
hey, hopefully this is just more setup for us to enjoy episode 5, which we've been enjoying the series so far. This is just a slight hiccup. But let us know out there, what do you think about the relationship between Poet and Lennox? What do you think about our intentions are at this point with Poet? And let us know, do you feel that storyline with Drew was even warranted so far in this season? So check out our review right after the episode airs on Hulu. You come back here, check out our review. Let us know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, whatever else needs to happen for us to get more views and for people to tell us they love this show. Granted, I understand this is on Hulu. It's already a hard watch. They tricked me too. I saw FX and thought FX, not FX on Hulu, which is the worst wording in the world when it's actually just Hulu, not FX on Hulu. But this has been another JVS television review. Peace, people.
Later, y'all. Justice for Drew.
Falling out the top of
I can see the skyline, 50 mile radius on my timeline.